Could I ask firstly, please, if there are any apologies? No, thank you. And secondly, if there are any declarations of interest. And again, I'll take that as a no. So moving on to agenda item 3, which is confirmation of the previous minutes, and I'll open the conversation up to any question or feedback. Errors or omissions? Nothing? Excellent. Could I ask for somebody to please move that they're accepted? Councillor Blackwell, seconded Councillor Hopkins. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on now to agenda item 4.1 in the decision reports. And the first report that we'll look at today is the Waitaki Annual Residents Survey Satisfaction Survey Report. And I will invite Mandy to please speak to this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neal. So I'll take the report as read. You've seen there the Annual Resident Satisfaction Survey Report and the final report there prepared by Key Research for the 22-23 year. You may have noticed that a number of the areas have dropped, but overall our performance is similar to the previous year. And as seen across a number of the councils, it's also in the executive summary, a lot of those results have dropped across the country this year, and that's to do with, they believe, to do with the affordability, rates increases, and a general sort of downward trend across all councils this year for the survey results that reflects the economic situation that we're all living in right now. So yes, the results this year were done using the postal to online methodology as well. And that method was compared against last year when we did the trial of the postal to online. We ran 2 methodologies in conjunction so that we had comparable results for this year going forward. The postal to online methodology was expected to show lower results than the phone portal methodology. And that's come through in different areas of this report. There are still some really good performing, strong performing areas, such as, you know, the aquatic centre, the Opera House, the libraries, and other areas of our facilities that people are enjoying. But yeah, it's the overall performances where the results have seemed to have dropped a bit. So yeah, happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. So I'll open up the floor to any questions. Sorry, Councillor Hopkins.
I notice on the page after the executive summary where the various responses that are listed, and the ones at the bottom half aren't good news for us. But on the next page, you do talk about this similar drop in levels of satisfaction that other councils have experienced when they move from postal or phone to online. And I'm just wondering, I notice you cite Key Research saying that people are perhaps likely to be a bit more polite when they're literally talking to a human being on the phone. But do we have anything other than sort of anecdotal evidence, or is there any quantification of the extent to which the change in survey method equates to a decrease in levels of satisfaction?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Yeah, it's about a 10% drop from the previous year, just on that methodology. So we had the previous results there in both formats. So about a 10% drop across those figures using the postal to online methodology. But as far as any other validation about what other councils are saying, that's just what we know. So unfortunately, I can't give you any more substance than that.
So the 10% drop may be to do with the switch in methodology, or it may be to do with the fact that, you know, more and more people are believe that the fee for services isn't fair and reasonable, that rates aren't fair and reasonable, that they're not satisfied with our performance, they're not getting overall value for money or whatever. I mean, those are all things that are trending in the wrong direction, aren't they?
Correct, and it's possibly a combination of the two right throughout, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess I had a couple of comments and questions. One on page 18, where we're looking at the cost of the survey, and we're talking about it going up to around about 37,000. That works out to me roughly at about $100 a survey participant if we're getting around 400. But it talks here about how it's going up because of rising printing and postage costs. But if we're moving to online, it should be going down, shouldn't it?
Yes, so I had similar concerns with how that price was increasing based on the cost of postal, but we are now we will be bringing the survey in-house next year so that we eliminate that cost completely. We'll be running it in-house because those costs have continued to climb. With the postal to online method, what they do is they actually send out a postcard invitation for people to participate initially, and then they'll send out a second reminder. So they are still reaching out to about, I think they sent out about 5,000 correspondence letters initially to try and drive that number through. So those costs are still reflective through that process, despite the fact that they're trying to then get them through to proceeding to continue it online. But because of those increasing costs, we did see that one opportunity here to bring it in-house. Similarly, CODC are running theirs in-house, and the ability to bring it in-house also means that we actually get more thorough detail, more thorough information back, and we can then actually respond to customers when they have concerns. We get anonymous verbatim to all of these surveys right now, so we can't actually go back and say, can they clarify where they're referring to with a certain area if they've got concerns, or can they, dive into that a little bit deeper so that we can actually address their concerns that they raise, and bringing it in-house will allow that ability to communicate back with them. So, yeah.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just wondering, how we distribute this information to our different departments, because I appreciate that there's obviously national pressures and that sort of thing, but I think there's also some really good feedback for us and our different departments to take on board. So what happens, I guess, internally?
So when we get the quarterly results received, then we share that with the managers, and some of those managers request to see the verbatim because some of it is very specific as far as unsatisfaction with toilets, but they're not saying specifically which toilets. They may refer, there's one on the hill, and you can kind of, I guess, which one that is that they get. So we do pass that on to our managers on a quarterly sort of verbatim and feedback form, and they'll then take that on and they'll come back to me and ask any questions that they're seeing that's relative that they can attend to. But as I said, the challenge with it being anonymous is when they refer to their roads in the area, we don't know which ward they're coming from either, which is why bringing that in-house and being able to see specifically where they are located through that process will really help us be able to be more responsive to this, add more value to these for our managers and for our total organisation, and be able to be more supportive to our customer issues out there. So, yeah.
One other comment I had was at the bottom of page 15 of the meeting, we talk about highest rated area being parks and reserve. However, while it performs highly, it's got a low impact on overall satisfaction. Is that because is there a weighting system that is applied to this?
They have different areas for, essentially for weighting, and they have the overall performance area, but whereas parks, it's the overall performance is a section sort of unto itself based on that performance area, whereas the parks kind of feeds into a certain, just your general satisfaction with your contributing areas. So there's an overall performance question in itself, which that doesn't lead into specifically. Yeah, did that help?
Okay, so how do we take this and make it do good? How do we pick up on that kind of feeling of inequity in the rural space, or some of those other areas where we can get some, I guess, some good bang for what we're trying to do here?
I guess this has always been one of the big areas that's always disappointed roading, because roading always comes off really disappointing in their performance now levels. And roading really take that quite personally, to be honest, because they care for their roads and they care for their residents, and they do want it. They do such good work out there, but it's not reflected through these. And there only is a sample size of 400 people across the year, and they're different people that they're reaching out to. There's also the confusion on some of those residents that are reached out to. They don't necessarily know that State Highway 1 or Thames Highway is a state highway. They don't really recognise that that's not council roads that we're looking after and maintaining. So that again is where moving to being an in-house process next year, we've got the opportunity to then do more with it. And we're also got a wider reach because this is taken from the electoral roll only. And we have seen in the past where multiple people in one household are being asked, which there's no concerns with that at all. But from a random selection of residents from electoral, I have expressed concerns to the research company before that how 5 members of one family can possibly get randomly selected to do this. Whereas going out to all age groups, we're actually going to get a better, more valued, more wider reach on how we can actually do things that fit our wider demographic, our wider communities. And we hope that that will have a better reach right across all of our, under 18-year-olds, our Pacifica communities, Māori, and actually get people involved. And we'll just do that by looking at providing a $500 one-off incentive sort of prize sort of thing for someone to be randomly drawn. So we get people in and get people interested and really, because at the moment, to what you're saying there, Mr. Neil, we can't do a lot with this information. It's very general feedback. And as I said, being anonymous, those that have got the roading concerns, it's not saying that it's on Pig Island Road or wherever in particular. It's just saying our road seals are poor, our road seals good. And so we need to be able to understand better what that is in order to be able to actually go there and make this of value to our communities.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Mandy, one of the things that did occur to me reading this, and I like, by the way, the revised questions that you've come up with, I think from page 99 of this report onwards. But it seems to me that it's almost as important to actually identify early on, not just levels of satisfaction, which can be misleading if they aren't married with levels of use. For instance, I think the satisfaction with the aquatic centre showed, 77% of people think it's fantastic who use it, but only 39% of the community goes there. The big raps on the library, but 58% of the community doesn't put a foot inside the place. And there's a number of others like that. I think Waitaki sports fields and facilities, 70% satisfaction, but only 24% of people actually use them. And I have a feeling that the Opera House was about 35, although again, very high levels of satisfaction from those who do go there. Can we have a survey in future where there are 2 performance indicators? Number 1 is the measures of satisfaction presented on a page as a chart, and number 2 are the levels of use. Because I think the second piece of information is probably almost as much, if not more, important for us and perhaps for the community as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. And when we look at how we best present the results next year, we'll be considering best ways to bring that information to. I guess what you can say at a very raw level is with what you're saying in regard to level of satisfaction in relation to levels of use. There's some great opportunities there. If only 35% of people are using the Opera House that we're asked, but there's 78%, it shows you we've got a fantastic asset base. We've got some fantastic facilities out there, but people aren't using them. So that's a great opportunity for us to get out there to our residents, get out there to our communities, our visitors and alike, and actually tell them about our facilities and let them know what we have so they can actually participate, because those people that are using them love them and value them. So it's reaching out there more and getting that better understanding.
I think that's a great insight to include when we do start to look at them next year. I think another thing to potentially look at including is also how we score against some of the other council benchmarks, because there are some questions in here. It's like if someone says to you, how happy are you with your power bill? Right, no one ever says, I think that's awesome. So there's going to be some low bars and there's going to be some high bars, and I think that it's really important that if we're reading comments like 4 in 10 people trust council to do the right thing for the district and its community, I think it's important that we're able to benchmark that against how that compares nationally, because whilst it looks bad on its own compared to other metrics, it may not be.
I was just going to say that currently through key research, they do the research for about 10 councils, and we will lose that comparable from a direct measure when we bring it in-house. But we will have the ability to work with CODC and see where they sit and actually have those conversations along the line. We've already had some conversations with them to make sure that, you know, what they've done, we can do the same in-house. We may look at using, we are looking at using still an external agent, be it Key Research or be it the Otago University, to actually compile the results at the end so that we aren't getting we don't want anything to be deemed biased by council perspective by pulling this information together. So we're looking at making sure we have an external party at least review it, if nothing else, as we go through that actual bringing that information to a report process.
All right, look forward to it. Deputy Mayor Halale.
Thank you. Through the chair, where does our strategic framework and our priorities, sit within this? I would think, that this would be used as a means to help measure, how we're tracking with our overall strategic kind of vision, our mission, and that framework that we use.
When this is a requirement of the long-term plan to deliver against your performance measures, and a number of those questions in that attachment there are part of the long-term plan written questions. As far as alignment to our strategic outcomes, it's not specifically in there at this stage because our strategic framework was only created last year. So these are based on the 21 to 31 long-term plan performance measures. And that we're actually in the process of reviewing those performance measures right now to make them more relevant to our community, to our people. A lot of the questions that we have got through our performance measures have become some degree not current in our environment today. So we have to make sure that what the questions that we're asking are specific to our resident satisfaction. That is ultimately what this is about. It's not about, it's how council is doing for our residents. It's not how we are doing unto ourselves. It's how we are doing for our residents in line with our community outcomes, which drive that. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I think everybody recognises the richness of what we can get out of this. And how it can feed into a whole lot of other really, really valuable sort of parts of the organisation, like the strategic plan. Councillor McKone.
Yeah, no, look, I think we have to remember it's just a guideline because you're taking a very small snapshot, and when you start working percentages, two people disagreeing with another two can change the percentages dramatically. So it's a guide of where we're at. I do wonder, a question, are we targeting the ratepayers as opposed to the residents? Because at the end of the day, I'm not sounding selfish, but they're the ones that pay the bills and they're the ones that will actually call the shots of what they want.
The questions do specify whether you're a resident or a ratepayer. At the moment, they are electoral roll, and then there's a question through there to say, are you a resident or a ratepayer? And it sort of stop there on some of those questions. But we will look at, I think if it's putting the questions forward, opening it up to the wider community, because we do have, a lot of great voices and a lot of things to hear and learn from our youth, but we can also identify within that they are a ratepayer or resident. So, ratepayer but don't live in Waitaki. So there's a number of questions there that ratepayer have a house in Waitaki, ratepayer live in Waitaki. So it's identifying who we are able to get through at that point is really important to add that value to the voices that we hear. Not saying that it'll rule anything out either way necessarily, but it's actually understanding, they're a ratepayer, so they've and the roads aren't up to what they expected to be paying, or whatever it may be. So it does give a different understanding and different context to it. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Since John's talking about questions, if I can just look at those, you've got a list of the new questions with your amendments in blue that I think they're on page 99 or 100 of our agenda. And I think the ones we are proposing to amplify, so the question about camping grounds, you're going to cite some, question about parks and reserves, you're going to mention some, playing fields and so on. But there's two where you ask 5C, have you lodged a customer request to council over the part? And then you say, is this relevant? Yes, I think it is. And you then go on to say there's no follow-up question, e.g. was this responded to or actioned in an acceptable time frame. You then go on to say, therefore you suggest this question is deleted. Well, I don't think it should be. I think the follow-up question should be asked to make it meaningful. And on the next page, page 7, have you used the Waitaki Resource Recovery Park? And again, you say, is this relevant? This is not a council service, or is it relevant with the legislative change? I think, especially in regard to that last question, I think it is relevant. And we do, after all, give them thick end of 300,000 plus a year. So although it's not a council service, it would literally crash and burn if it weren't for council funding. So it's useful to know what it's achieving and who's using it. So those are just the other amendments to the questions you make perfect sense, but in those ones you're asking us a question and I'm just giving you my feedback on both of those.
Appreciate that, and that's why I'll put those questions in there, because on its own, that number 5C seemed to add no value on its own. We needed either a follow-up or we take it out. So happy to put that follow-up question in there. And likewise, with regard to the Waitaki Resource Recovery Park, we always get some great feedback on that question, but I just wasn't sure whether it had been introduced, but I'm happy to keep that in there. I just wanted that question put out there for you all to consider whether we continue that. So happy to do so. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm conscious of time, but Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Just to go a step further on 5C, I just wondered if there's an opportunity to actually ask the person if they actually have the reference number from the CRM that's been raised and they have a concern about it, they could actually put it in there so we're able to really drill into what happened specifically.
That can be looked at as an option for sure. It would probably be if you weren't satisfied kind of a thing, then what's your reference number so we can look further into why. Well, we'd have to dig into that, but it might be something we follow up later outside of the survey with them. So, just depending on what we get back and that. So thank you though.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, sorry, just before we do that, I wanted to just check and make sure that none of the other committee members objected to Councillor Hopkins' proposal that the questions remain included. Excellent. So we can note that there are no objections, and a question from Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, and just further to the one around question 7 around the resource recovery park, I just wonder whether if the people from Kiriau, like Ohau, etc., are jumping straight to that question, missing the waters one, whether is it worth asking them about whether they use the council recovery park transfer stations in those areas, maybe instead of coming to Ormeru for their recycling.
So you're saying just using the Waitaki transfer?
Or adding those extra ones to see whether they may use those, because they might bring all their stuff to Ormeru, but they might use those ones up the valley.
Excellent. Another supported proposal. Great. All right. Look, so thank you very much, Mandy. I think the survey is going to get richer and the information used even more going forward, especially when we bring it in-house. So if I could ask somebody to move. Councillor Hopkins, seconded. Councillor McCone. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you. That's carried. We'll now move on to agenda item 4.2, looking at the insurance renewal for 23-24. And again, I believe you have the microphone for this, Mandy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neil. Yes, so again, I'll take the report as read. This is just presenting the insurance renewal for 23-24 and noting in the report an attachment number 1. A number of those premiums haven't been confirmed. However, Aon has indicated they're confident with that amount of increase that has been estimated there for the 23-24 year. The 22-23 year has been a very difficult year, not only globally, but here in New Zealand from a financial and insurance perspective. A lot of the increases have come on the back of New Zealand's raising profile after the Cyclone Gabrielle and Auckland flood events, which were very expensive events across New Zealand. With Auckland floods estimated cost $1 billion New Zealand, and Cyclone Gabrielle estimated cost $890 million. Because of that high cost, a number of the local insurers actually had to reinsure their profile because it was such a risk in New Zealand for those insurance holders. So a lot of people are pulling out of the insurance market. When I say people, insurance providers are pulling out of the insurance market, or if they're staying in requiring higher premiums or requiring a lot more detailed information for renewing any premiums, because it is a risk to them as much as insurance is. one thing that we use to minimize our risk is being an insurance provider is a risk to them, with the amount of loss that they're facing globally through different events and increasing amount of events. So what I have put there is what our estimated premium cover will be on the current schedules that we hold. And I've also presented an attachment to some considerations if we did want to look at reducing that portfolio. There's not a lot that I have proposed because it is up to yourselves to consider how much risk you are willing to carry in an environment where there are increasing events and increasing claims and increasing, people are taking more people to court for various situations they didn't before. So our PL is important. So the premium considerations that I have proposed there is there are a number of property and Three Waters assets that we still self-insure. There are an increasing number of claim events that are leading to a rise in those premium costs. With that, it's not just the weather events, there's also the increase in cyber attacks, increase in embezzlement, and they're saying that the increase in embezzlement is coming with as a result of working from home after COVID-19. They're seeing more risk in that area coming through. And there's also an increase in cases against employers for matters arising, such as those under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So just said there, any decision to reduce cover must be made with the awareness of an increasingly challenging environment that we operate in. So one of the council policies that we hold is the group personal cover. It only costs about $1,500 for the year. It's not an expensive policy, but it is one that we could consider whether we see it as adding value to our portfolio. Essentially, it is intended to pay for some cover if one of our elected members or executive team members is off work for a period as a result of a health issue or a accident. Some money comes back to council to cover for that cost. It does require that whoever is unwell or injured provides all of their medical details to me for me to lay that claim. And that's, there are situations where people have had claims, a claim that could have been made, but I don't know. So it's a matter of you needing to inform me in order for that claim to be put through. We have had a payout under that policy. We have had two payouts. One was a $10,000 payout and the other was $100 for a broken thumb. You could have. The other consideration there that I've pointed out is the material damage schedule. And there are a number of assets that we could consider insuring for indemnity only if we wanted to reduce that schedule by any amount. That includes the residential properties at Allen Street, Oamaru Gardens and Test Street and the airport hangar. There are several assets within the Oamaru Gardens that we could consider removing from the schedule, such as the aviary structures, the Croquet Garage, the Croquet Pavilion, the Croquet Shelter, Infirmary. If we want to think about, what we do with those buildings in the long term, if they were to be damaged, would we replace them? And then we have added a number of additional Three Waters assets that have, through their latest valuation, they've increased significantly in value. They're now at a $7 million value, whereas previously they weren't on the schedule. So they are critical assets, but I'm putting it out there for yourselves for any directive if you want to consider that. As I said, that decision just needs to be made considering this environment that we are in with a high level of risk with different events and claim situations. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that update. I think, looking around the age of some of the councillors, you probably don't want to get rid of that policy, but I'll open the floor up to comments and feedback. Who's got some questions? Councillor McCone.
Whole heap of questions. So the premium for material damage of business interruption, what percentage or what are we paying as so how much do we have to front up with before the insurance company kick in? I suppose my question is it on a percentage of the value of the asset, or how does that work? Will be the first question. I'll let you get that one first, and then I'll keep going if that's right.
We have different. If I'm answering your question correctly, just please correct me if I'm wrong. We have different excess levels for different assets. So Our council HQ building, a majority of our buildings sit around a $50,000 excess. That includes the community housing as well. Then a number of our assets sit at a $5,000 or $2,000 asset. So all of our community halls are on a we insure a number of the community halls around the district to help them out. They've got, because to insure their building themselves would have been about 3 or 4 times the rate of what we can do it as a bulk discount. So they're at a $5,000 excess for the halls, as is our public toilets in a cluster. And I believe our gardens maybe in that same $5,000 excess cluster. Then we have a number that are also in a $2,000 excess cluster, and they're the ones that we have leased. They're our commercial lease buildings essentially. So like Steam and 2410s, they're in that bracket. And that's because in our lease agreements, we have a $2,000 excess in there. That was something that our insurers had wanted to knock out from availability this year to increase that excess up to at least the $5,000 minimum. They haven't yet come back and confirmed that yet. So it would mean that we'd have a self-insure capacity there of sort of a 3,000 gap we would have to cover if an event arose. But that's what our leases require. So did that answer that?
Yes, I did, thank you. And I just further that, so lots of pipework infrastructure for water and sewers, is that covered as well?
So we've got 2 insurances for our underground infrastructure, 2 insurance schemes. One is through Aon, which is as part of our material damage scheme, and that's a $50,000 excess on those assets there. And then we have another level of that insurance is covered under our LAP scheme. So with Aon really only insures above ground on the material damage. But if they have a facility that's got like a treatment plant above and has ponds, they will still insure it. There's different exclusions around the types of ponds, but we have checked that ours will sit within that, and we're all covered within that one. Under the LAP scheme, it's quite a different excess. You've got to spend the damage has to be in excess of about $400,000 in order for us to sort of even consider making a claim through that LAP scheme, which is where the Aon scheme has benefit, and that's got a $50,000 excess for any one event. But the LAP scheme's the claims are based on sort of your GDP, and your cutoff point's about a $400,000. But if that one sort of kicks in, if there's quite a significant event, you've got a lot of excesses there, and they step in quite quickly, and they'll come through quite freely, and they'll give you money ahead of that actual claim being processed. Whereas, so you tell them there's a situation, you can give them an estimate of how much they can see it based on the news as a general rule, and they'll come to the party and give you money up in advance. Whereas any of our other policies, you have to get that whole cost of it recovered. You've got to pay all those invoices before you can get any of that money back as well.
We'll give Councillor Hopkins a go.
Mr. Chair, look, just to be absolutely clear, I know you mentioned before that some things we self-insure, but the information on page 118 of our agenda, we're actually paying $1,344,900 in insurance premiums, or will do. I mean, yeah, it just keeps on getting worse and worse, doesn't it? Or more and more difficult to kind of make ends meet. Question number 2, are you able, you talk about you mentioned the personal cover, and it seems to me, and I don't think it has anything to do with age, but I was interested that you actually had paid out 10,000. So there may well be good reasons for maintaining that cover, especially since I think you've identified it's pretty cheap. More to the point, you talk about several assets in the Omara Gardens and the residential properties in Elm Street, Test Street, Airport Hangar, the Avery, Croquet Garage, Pavilion, Shelter, Infirmary. It would be helpful to me if you could tell me what the quantum saving would be if those things were taken off the lists. Are you able to do that?
Off the top of my head, no. But as far as changing from indemnity value for reinstatement to indemnity on those houses that I suggested, there would be very limited saving. Maybe across those sort of 5 properties that we have through the gardens, and the 5 residential properties, we might only save sort of $5,000 all up. With regard to the garden properties, looking at if you wanted me to look at that further, I propose that I bring a list of those gardens assets to you with a list of what we are paying insurance per building, and then go from there. But I think we pay for the total gardens cluster about $20,000 for the total gardens. So there's not a lot to be gained there.
I think, Mayor Kircher, you have a question first.
Just a quick one. You say there's 5 houses, but do we, are they different to community housing, and also the airport houses? Are they separate to that as well? Are they all insured on the same basis? How does that work?
No, currently the airport houses are not insured at all. We self-insure those. We have the community houses are all on a $50,000 excess, and the other 3 houses, I think there's 4 houses including the gardens, I believe are on a $5,000 excess. It's but they are all on a full replacement value. The ones that we are insured, the 3 at the airport, the 2 or 3 at the airport aren't insured at all, as I said, so they're self-insured. The others are on full replacement.
Supplementary to that, is there any issues if, or are we insured for third party or whatever it might be, if one of those airport houses burns down and council's found liable for like the contents and so forth?
We do have an insurance policy that under our material damage schedule, any building up into the $250,000 that isn't on our schedule will be insured. But I believe that those properties out at the airport are on about a $300,000 to $350,000 value, so they wouldn't fall into that. We don't have any. If there's tenants in there, any tenants in any building, it's their own contents that they're required to hold. So we wouldn't have any liability unless something that we had done had caused that loss. But we don't. We essentially are self-insuring those properties.
So I think it's a really useful discussion, and I think any of us that pay personal insurance bills at home have seen similar kind of, if not worse, increases coming out of it. So it is the nature of the insurance environment that we're in at the moment. I do think, though, that if, Mandy, you think there are some areas that we could save some money in that collectively might add up to $25,000-$30,000. You know, it all counts, and so I think if you were able to prepare a schedule of recommendations that members could consider, that would be a useful exercise. Sorry, Councillor McCone, you had another question?
Yeah, no, look, I agree with just what you said, Simon. Just 2 questions, 3 minutes. So I see you've got drone and standing timber. Is the drone, do we fly one? Is that what that's all about? That's just covering us for something?
That's correct. Drone activity isn't covered under public liability insurances. So if we fly over a car and cause an accident or whatever, or fly into a bridge and cause whatever, then that's on us, but it's not covered by public liability. So it's a separate insurance that requires you to form out all your CAA flyers, airport. It's basically like having an actual airport itself, like having a plane. You've got to have all of those registrations. So, yeah.
So the trees is the other question. I presume that's for fire, but are any of them under carbon credits? Because that can be very painful if you are under carbon credits and you do have a fire. It'll break you.
Yes, we do have a portion under carbon credits, not a high proportion. I can't remember the number for that. I just read in the annual report. Do you remember? But I think there's like 8,000. Is that falling into my head somewhere? But this is we went through a new policy holder last year. The bigger issue that we had the year prior on our renewal was with mountain bike tracks going through our forests. Our previous policy provider wasn't ensuring whether our mountain bike activity as a result of the Port Hills incident where they had the fires in there about 3 years ago. So we've now changed our provider, and they are now reinsuring those full forestry, even those including that mountain bike track again. So yeah.
Councillor Blackler.
Oh, just before I ask my question, the mountain biking scenario, is there an additional built-in kind of risk factor to the premium?
No, they haven't built that in. The fees are going up this year for our insurance on the on the timber insurance, but that's based on the valuation of our forestry increasing. So nothing to do with that relationship with this provider. There was something new that they only introduced sort of 2 years prior about this track issue on the previous policy provider that we had. Not something that we'd ever been aware was an issue. So it's just a new thing. But right now the timber is something with the value going up for shortage globally. That's where our premium has increased.
Thank you. My two questions were, I just wondered if you could just cover off what the professional indemnities covering throughout the organisation, and also the relationship between the LAP and Aon. Like, I understand that with the LAP, it's 60% funding or something like that of whatever occurs. So does Aon come in parallel to that, or is it an and/or type thing?
No. I'll start with the PI. So that's basically where there's been advice given. So one risk area right now that's pertinent right around the country is with the engineer that's been fraudulently signing the work for, and 42 councils have been affected on their issue of code of compliance, and it's affected about 1,000 properties. So that's impacted by a PI because they've issued off buildings as compliant based on what they've been provided by engineers scoping, and they haven't necessarily been because that person acted fraudulently. So that's a PI protection for that particular activity. And we have a number of things that come under PI where we provide a limb, for example. That's us saying that this is what's okay with that building, issues with that building. But if we incorporated the wrong information for the wrong building, that would be a PI because it's advice that we've given to a person buying. Okay, so it's your advice area. So does that cover that one? Yep. So with regard to the LAP and Aon relationship, no, they don't step in for that componentry. You've got very set schedules of what you have under each insurance. So we've got a material damage schedule with Aon, and they cover those assets in an event. And then we have a separate schedule with LAP that covers those Three Waters assets in an event. The LAP schedule is very much for an event that's more than just one building. It's very much a big event, similar to your Gabrielle's or an earthquake or whatever, where it's going to step in at that point. LAP and Aon do have a relationship together, have formed a relationship in recent years where the information that we provide to our LAP schedule is provided through to LAP via Aon, but that's more just to give them that market assurance when it comes to placing those insurances globally. Yeah.
All right. So I think we can, we appreciate that the insurance game is fairly complex and there's lots of nuances, and that you're doing the very best job to get us the best deal that we can, and you're going to go away and have a look and see whether there are a few more pennies that we can save along the way. Councillor Hopkins, you have one more question?
It's just one request. Yes, it is a request. Mandy did mention the fact that we do self-insure, and I think in addition to looking for the savings and the premiums, you may want to include options for increased self-insurance as well to get that 1.344 million down. And on that basis, if you allow, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendations, although I think based on the conversation we've just had, the second one should read that council confirms the insurance renewal for 2023-24 with premium changes to be agreed. But I don't think we're going to vote for the ones as presented because we've asked for amendments.
Yeah, I don't think we are, but at the same time, I don't want this to drag on longer in terms of the process. So I think what we've asked for Mandy to do is to go away and look at where there can be some additional savings, and also report back on whether there's the potential to increase the self-insurance. But in principle, I think we're asking if we can agree to the premium. So on that basis, are you still happy to move it?
Yeah.
And we have a seconder, Councillor Halali, Deputy Mayor Halali. Thank you. So all those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll move on now to the last agenda item of the day, which is 5.1, the finance update. Amanda. Thank you, Mandy.
Good afternoon. This is a bit of a chunky update. There's three main matters that that I've provided an update here on the audit of the 30 June 23 annual report. So bullet point detail there of where we're at. We're still negotiating the fee, but we've agreed to set the audit arrangement in place for 1 year, and we'll come back to the 24 and 25 years at another date. The audit team's being worked out behind the scenes, and the audit is all set to start on the 30th of October next week. And they're hoping to sign it by be complete by the 8th of December and looking to sign on the council meeting on the 12th of December. So we will bring a draft annual report just for review to the 28th of November PAR committee meeting. The year-to-date financial performance, I'm sorry, there's not the 30 September results here, the normal report that you receive. We're a bit short-staffed at the moment, but the P&L is looking pretty close to budget. We're sitting at a $3 million surplus for the 3 months to 30 September versus a $2.6 million surplus in the budget. So it's not too far off, about 400K variance. So that's a lot to do with timing of maintenance work. The balance sheet's pretty much on track. We are ahead of where we planned to be borrowing wise, but that has been spent in CapEx. So in terms of the CapEx spend, we were sitting at about 8.9 million against a budget of 4.4 million. So that's $4.6 million variance, 2.9 is in waters and about 900K in roading, which is largely put down to timing variances. So there's been a lot of work leading up until this point in design and contract preparation. And now there's quite a lot of work going ahead. So it's just a timing type thing. And as I mentioned before, that CapEx has been paid for with borrowing. So those two areas, the assets and the borrowing, are sitting ahead of budget. And then the last section that I've talked about in this update is the response to your previous request for further detail on the contractor and consulting spends. So there is a detailed table for the contractor spends. Hopefully that's all self-explanatory. The second last column variance to budget, you can see contractors general and contract maintenance is a bit higher, 2.9 and 1.6 ahead of budget. So a lot of that was due to the emergency roadworks needed at the start of the 23 financial year. So that was 3.2. There was also 200K spent on emergency works on the Alps to Ocean track. And then 2 million of the overrun was put down to inflationary pressures across most departments. We also had a bit of unbudgeted staff shortages, and so contractors were needed to provide backfill in specialty areas. And consultancy, so the timing, the transformation program budget wasn't put in the 23 budget. It was a decision made at a later date. So that was 620K higher than what was budgeted. And then extra work on the district plan. And I've also provided a breakdown of the top consultants and contractors that we use and the types of projects that we use them for.
Thank you very much. I will open it up to questions from the floor. I expect there'll be a couple. Councillor Wackler.
I presume we'll just go through it in order, like start with audit and then work our way through. Just a question on the audit section. I just wondered, we mentioned previously this time round there'll be a focus on keeping track on time taken and stuff like that. And I just wondered, there's the comment there around remote working, and I wondered how that might interfere or play a part in making it difficult to keep track of things. Do you have any concerns in that space?
Yep, so the auditors use a system called Audit Dashboard, and so they put requests on by section, specific requests of information or queries that they've got, and then we can loaded in for them or put responses, and it says who did it and the time that they did it, the time it was requested, the time it was responded to. So that's quite good for tracking right down to the infinite detail. As far as not coming on site, we should save some hours in travel time that we've had to incur in the past. But yeah, that is going to be a big area of focus at the end, looking back, or we're going to have regular meetings throughout the audit just to see what's on track by section and
I think it's fair to say that there will be a lot of attention focused on time spent by audit this time around, because we want to reduce the amount of time that we spend talking about how much it's going to cost us in the future. So I also have a meeting with the Chief Executive in Audit New Zealand on Friday, just to talk a little bit more about some of the wider issues associated with the way that this has gone. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, two questions, both about the contractors. Forgive me if I'm missing something, but the graph you have on page 121, looking from the left-hand side, 2023 actual dollars, 2023 budget dollars, 2023 actual dollars. And
I think that's I was just going to check that up. I think that's a typo. That should be 2022.
that's what I thought. That's what I wanted to check. Okay. So the actual 2022 is the 8267, etc. Yep, on the right hand side. Okay. Now the other question, and I just want to clarify this because I can see it becoming possibly an issue in the minds of some. On the next page, you've got the Maven consulting bill. What you're saying is that essentially, I think I heard you say before, essentially that's 2 years, not one. And I'm also wondering whether it would be helpful if we were able to allocate a portion of that to transformation and a portion to IT review and secondment, because it might be, I mean, I can just see people saying, look at that, 978,000 for transformation. So I'm just wondering if you would agree with me that it's not exactly 1 year's bill based on what you said, and two, that it would be helpful to split the costs to areas where the consulting was done.
Yeah, that's something we would look to do in the future, like having this consultants general and even the contractors general code. It would be good if we had more detailed breakdown. But in my first line of narrative, included in that amount is 820 spent on consultants for the transformation program.
Yes.
So there was 200k budget and 820 actually spent. So that's for 1 year, the 23 financial year on transformation.
Yeah, so I think
So 1 year's worth.
it's what there's not split across 2 years. This is all the 1 year
1 year.
worth of work.
Okay.
I think the other really important thing to note here is that of that 820k of overspend, 620 of it was approved by council through a specific meeting. So effectively, council has approved that overspend.
Yeah, so the budget was just wrong. We'd only had 200. It was just a timing thing of adding that extra 820 to the budget a bit later.
Councillor McKone.
I'm going to surprise everybody and make a comment. Courtney will growl at me because she says I'm tight anyway. But look, thank you for the way that's set up. It clears a whole lot of stuff up, and we can see what's going on. It gives us a direction to start getting the knife out and trim some of the stuff back, and then perhaps with the change of parliamentary stuff we've had in the last fortnight or 3 weeks, some of these consultants may no longer be doing as much as they are. So time will tell, but thank you for making it more understandable.
Thank you. Any further questions from the floor? Councillor Ryan.
Just a quick one on the consultants and contractors. Just we're mentioning, I guess, staff shortages, backfill for vacancies. Is that an ongoing issue, or I guess where are things at the moment in terms of vacancies and?
Yes, it is an ongoing issue. I think there's certainly been an improvement in the recruitment environment probably over the last 3 to 4 months, that we're getting both improved numbers and I suppose a good range of candidates that are getting a good range of viable candidates for the roles. So that has improved, but Certainly still in the IS area, it is very challenging to recruit people. So it's, yes, some good news and some bad, but the places where we need to continue delivering services or need that need to be able to cover roles and provide services, we are still using consultants if we can't staff it in any other way. And I see Mr. Cook could comment as well.
Yeah, I'm conscious also of time in the next session about to start, but Mr. Cook, you have a comment, and then there's a question from Councillor Halale.
Just in connection with the use of consultants, certainly in planning and building, we use a consultant in each department as part of our business continuity. So we don't roster to our peak demands, we roster to our sort of average demands. And then as the peaks come on, we use consultants to meet statutory timeframes.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Halale.
Yeah, I thank you through the chair, not a question, but more of a comment. I think it's just the reality that we have around the capacity and capability, like of our staff, and then also just it tells a story when you look at it in the areas that we're needing to, to use consultants. And then I guess the next question is, what's the time frame that we might start to see, like a wee drop off in the use of it, but it depends on the scope and the projects that we're needing them for. But yeah, there's an obvious issue there with our workforce development gaps in schools that we just need to be kind of mindful of.
Thank you. Is there any other question or comment? If not, could I thank you very much. I think to Councillor McCone's point, there's some really useful transparency in a lot of this information that's coming through, and I think it's something that we are keen to see more of as we go forward. On that basis, could I please ask for somebody to move that we accept this? Councillor McCone, seconded Deputy Mayor Halale. And all those in favour, please say aye. Against? That's carried, and that is the last agenda item for today. So on that note, I will declare it's 1:57 and the meeting is closed. Thank you very much.